Christmas card arrived on December 3rd, and I almost didn't open it. It had my son's return address on the back, the one in Raleigh, the house I helped him put a down payment on 6 years ago. I remember standing at the mailbox in my driveway, holding that envelope, turning it over in my hands like it might tell me something before I even tore the seal. It didn't. Inside was a card with a snowy village scene on the front. Very nice. The kind you buy in bulk at Target, and inside, in my daughter-in-law Renata's handwriting, not my son's, wishing you a peaceful holiday season. Owen and Renata. That was it. No, Dad. No, was it? Lord quat love. No, we'd love to see you. Just a peaceful holiday season, like I was a business acquaintance who'd done them a small favor once. My son Owen is 41 years old. He works in logistics. He married Renata 9 years ago, and I want to be clear about that. I genuinely tried to build a relationship with her. I took them to dinner. I watched their dog when they went to Cancun for their anniversary. I never said a word when she redecorated the bedroom I used to sleep in when I visited, the one that used to have my old fishing photos on the wall, and replaced everything with a neutral gray palette that looked like a hotel lobby. I tried. 2 weeks before that Christmas card arrived, Owen had called me. It was a Sunday afternoon in November, and I was watching the Panthers game with half my attention while I sorted through some old boxes in the garage. When I saw his name on my phone screen, I felt that little lift in my chest that I think never goes away, no matter how old your kids get or how complicated things become. You just always hope. "Hey, bud," I said. "Hey, Dad." A pause. "So listen, I wanted to call you before the holidays so things aren't weird." I turned the game off. Renata and I have talked about it, and we're doing Christmas just the two of us this year. We need the space. She's been really stressed about her job, and having guests, it just adds a lot. I sat down on a cardboard box that wasn't quite sturdy enough for that, and I caught myself on the workbench. "I'm not a guest," I said. I didn't say it to be difficult. I said it because I genuinely wasn't sure he understood what word he'd used. "Dad, you know what I mean." "I don't think I do, Owen." There was a longer pause. I could hear Renata's voice in the background, not the words, just the cadence of someone coaching from the sidelines. "It would just be easier," he said finally. "I hope you understand. We'll do something in the spring." We'd been doing something in the spring for 3 years, running. In the spring of the previous year, that something had been a 40-minute lunch at a Panera off I-40, because Renata had a thing in the afternoon, and they couldn't make it into the city where I lived. I'd driven an hour and 20 minutes each way for a U-Pick 2 and a parking lot goodbye hug. I told Owen I understood because there was nothing else useful to say in that moment. I did not understand. Christmas morning that year, I drove to a diner about 2 miles from my house called Greta's. It's the kind of place that's been there since the 80s, with vinyl booths and coffee that comes in those thick ceramic mugs that are impossible to break. I'd driven past it 1,000 times and never gone in. I went in because I didn't want to sit alone in my kitchen on Christmas morning eating cereal, which felt like a specific kind of sad I wasn't ready to be. The place was quiet. A few other people at the counter. A young man in scrubs, who'd clearly just gotten off a night shift. An older woman with a paperback. A couple who looked like they'd been married long enough to not need to talk anymore but were happy about it. The waitress who seated me had a reindeer headband on and called me on, and brought me coffee without asking. I ordered the short stack and scrambled eggs, and I sat there eating and looking out the window at the empty parking lot in the gray December sky, and I thought about what I was going to do with the rest of the day. I hadn't made plans because I'd spent most of November telling myself things might still change, that Owen might call back, that there'd been a misunderstanding. There are certain moments when you see your life very clearly. Not in a dramatic way, just clearly, like when the fog burns off a lake and you can suddenly see all the way to the other side. That was one of those mornings. "Excuse me, are you here alone?" I looked up from my eggs. The woman was about my age, maybe a year or two younger, standing in the aisle with her coat still on. She had reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the look of someone who asks direct questions without being rude about it. "I am," I said. "My brother was supposed to meet me, and he canceled 20 minutes ago." She gestured at the crowded section near the front, then back toward where I was sitting in a quieter corner. "Every booth up there has 6 people in it, and I just want to eat in peace." Would you mind if I... She pointed at the other side of my booth. Please, I said. Her name was June. She was a retired middle school librarian. She'd been living in the same neighborhood for 22 years, but had never been to Greta's either, which we both found funny. She had 2 grown daughters who lived in Seattle and Portland respectively, and she talked about them the way people talk about their kids when the relationship is actually good, with mild exasperation and obvious pride, complaining about things that were clearly not real complaints. We sat in a booth for almost 2 hours. I found out her daughters called her every Sunday, that she'd started taking a watercolor class at the community center and was terrible at it and going anyway. That her brother, the one who just canceled on her, had a habit of doing this, and she'd gotten to a place of amused acceptance about it rather than hurt feelings. And I thought about how long it had taken her to get there, and whether that was a skill you could learn, or something that just happened to you over time. When we finally got up to leave, she handed me a card. Old-fashioned, paper, with just her name and phone number on it. She was the kind of person who still had personal cards. "Merry Christmas," she said. "I hope your next one is better." She said it matter-of-factly, without pity, and that made it land differently than sympathy would have. I got home and put her card on the kitchen counter and looked at it for a while. I called her 4 days later to thank her for the company. We talked for 40 minutes. She invited me to a New Year's Eve gathering she was hosting. Just a small group, she said, mostly neighbors, nothing elaborate. She was making chili. I almost said no. I had a whole list of reasons ready, the main one being that I was 63 years old, and the idea of walking into a room full of strangers on New Year's Eve felt like something I'd outgrown, the desire for some time in my late 40s. Instead, I said yes. The gathering was at her house 3 blocks over from mine. One of those older ranch styles with hardwood floors and a lot of books and a gas fireplace going, and she had maybe 12 people there, mostly retired or semi-retired. And within about 20 minutes I was in the kitchen talking to her neighbor Philip, who'd spent 30 years as a civil engineer and had opinions about bridge construction that were surprisingly compelling. I also met her daughter Claire, who'd flown in from Seattle and was warm and sharp, and looked at her mother the way you hope your kids will look at you. I stayed until almost 1 in the morning. Over the next 6 months, June and I had dinner twice a month, sometimes more. Not romantically, or at least not at first, and that's a different story, but as friends in the particular way that older adults can be friends, which is with less performance and more honesty than you usually manage when you're younger. She told me about her marriage that had ended 14 years ago. Not bitterly, just factually, the way you talk about weather. I told her about Owen. I told her things about Owen and Renata that I hadn't said out loud to anyone, because there's something about saying a thing out loud to another person that makes it real, and I hadn't been ready for it to be real. "What do you want from him?" she asked me one night. We were at an Italian place on the east side that she knew and I'd never been to. "What do I mean? What outcome are you hoping for? When you think about how things should go with Owen, what does that look like?" I started to say the obvious thing, that I wanted things to be better, that I wanted him to call more, that I wanted to be invited to Christmas. But she was watching me in the way that good librarians probably watch kids who are trying to find the right answer, without having actually thought about it, patient but waiting for the real version. "I want him to see me," I said finally. "Not need me for something. Just see me." She nodded. "Then you should let him come to that on his own," she said. "And in the meantime, you should build a life that doesn't have that hole in the middle of it." I turned 64 that July. June organized a birthday dinner at her house. Her 2 daughters were both in town for the summer, along with Philip from next door and his wife, and a few other people I'd come to know over the months. Claire baked a cake. Her sister, Noelle, who was an emergency room nurse and had the dry humor that seems to come standard with that job, gave a toast that made everybody laugh. I sat at that table and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, which was that I was somewhere I was supposed to be. My son called for my birthday. It was a 3-minute call. He wished me happy birthday and asked how I was doing in the way that doesn't expect a real answer. I told him I was doing well. I told him I'd had dinner with friends. He said that was great, that he was glad I was keeping busy. Keeping busy. About 4 months after that, Owen called on a Thursday night. It was late for a phone call, almost 9, and when I answered and heard his voice, something in my chest recognized the register of it. Not the usual careful, managed tone he'd had for years, but something closer to the voice he had when he was 16 and his car broke down and he didn't know what to do. "Hey, Dad, do you have a minute?" "I have time," I said. "So," he stopped, cleared his throat. "Things have been kind of rough lately. Renata and I are." Another stop. "We're having some problems." I let the silence sit for a moment. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Whatever I felt about Renata and the ways things had gone, I didn't want my son's marriage to fall apart. "Yeah." His voice was tight. "The thing is, we've got some debt we're dealing with, and she's been stressed about it. And I feel like I'm drowning a little, and I was wondering," and there it was. "How much?" I asked. "It's about 14,000 between two credit cards. We've been carrying it for a while, and the interest is just killing us." $14,000. My pension from 31 years in commercial real estate wasn't extravagant, but I'd been careful with money my whole life, and I was comfortable. He knew that. "Owen," I said, "I love you. I want you to know that before I say anything else." "Dad, let me finish." I took a breath. "I'm not going to lend you $14,000. And here's why. Not because I don't have it, but because the two of you are adults with careers and this is yours to figure out. If I step in every time there's a financial problem, I'm not helping you. I'm taking something from you." I heard him exhale sharply. "You don't think I'd pay you back?" "This isn't about trust. I've been down that road with other people I love, and borrowing from family doesn't work the way you think it will. What I'll do is this. I'll pay for one session with a fee-only financial advisor, a real one, not someone trying to sell you products. 1 hour. I'll make the call and book the appointment, and I'll pay the fee. That's what I can offer." The silence on his end was a specific kind of silence. "I can't believe you," he said, and there was something in his voice I recognized from when he was a teenager. The particular indignation of someone who hasn't gotten what they wanted and needs to reframe that as an injustice. "I'm your son. I know you are. I came to you, Dad. That's not easy for me. I know. And I'm not dismissing that. I'm telling you what I can actually do for you." He said he needed to think and he'd call me back. He didn't call me back. Not that week. Not the next week. A month went by. I sent him a text on a Tuesday to say I was thinking about him and hoped things were sorting themselves out. He sent back a thumbs up. Months passed. I'm not going to tell you I didn't feel the absence of it. I did. You don't stop loving your kid because they're making it difficult. You just love them from a different posture. Less leaning forward, more standing steady. June's younger daughter, Noelle, got engaged that February to a man named Barrett who worked in hospital administration and who had the particular quality of really listening when you talked, which I've always thought was underrated. The engagement party was at June's house, and her older daughter, Claire, flew in again, and I was there because by that point I was simply part of the landscape of June's life, and she was part of mine. At some point in the evening, Claire found me in the kitchen where I was refilling the ice bucket, and she said, "My mom talks about you, you know. Good things, I hope. She says you remind her that people can still surprise her." Claire tilted her head. That's high praise from her. The wedding was set for that October. An outdoor ceremony at a vineyard about 40 minutes from the city. Noelle asked me to do a reading, which was one of the more unexpected honors of my recent life, and I said yes without hesitating. 3 weeks before the wedding, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. "Dad, it's Owen." I hadn't heard his voice in 4 months. "Hey," I said. I heard something. His voice was careful, controlled. "From someone who knows someone. I know that sounds stupid, but apparently you're going to be in some wedding. News travels in funny ways." "I am," I said. "A close friend's daughter." "A close friend," he repeated. "Who?" "A woman I met about 2 years ago. Her name is June. I've spent a lot of time with her family." The quiet on his end was the quiet of someone recalibrating. "I didn't know you had. I didn't realize things had changed that much for you." "A lot has changed," I said simply. Not harshly, just honestly. Are you together?" "That's not really the relevant question, Owen." Another recalibration silence. "I'm glad you're doing well," he said finally. He sounded like he was working hard to mean it and almost getting there. I know you are, I said. I hope you are too. We talked for about 20 minutes, which was longer than we'd talked in over a year. He didn't ask for money. He asked about my knee, which I'd had scoped in the spring. He told me he and Renata were seeing a counselor and that things were slowly getting better. I told him that was genuinely good to hear. Before we hung up, he said, maybe we could have dinner sometime. Just us. Not a big thing. I'd like that, I said. The wedding was on a Saturday in the middle of October, one of those fall days that seems almost theatrical in how perfect it is, the kind of day that makes you think someone must have arranged it. The vineyard was golden in the afternoon light, and Noelle wore a dress that made her mother cry happy tears from her seat in the front row, and Barrett looked at her during the ceremony the way that makes everyone around them privately think about love and what they want from it. I read from a Mary Oliver poem, just a few lines about choosing to be alive and paying attention, and I got through it without my voice giving out, which I'd been worried about. At the reception afterward, I was sitting at a table with Philip and his wife and a few of June's friends when I noticed Owen had arrived. I hadn't invited him. He'd asked if he could come, quietly, in a text the week before, and I'd said yes. He was standing at the edge of the reception area in a navy blazer, looking a little uncertain, the way people do when they're in a room full of strangers who all seem to know each other. I caught his eye from across the space and raised my glass slightly. He made his way over. He shook hands with Philip. He was introduced to Claire and her husband. He watched June fuss affectionately over a table arrangement and then stopped to squeeze my arm as she passed. And I saw something move across his face. Recognition of something, I think. The recognition that I had a life here. That these people were real and they knew me and they had shown up in a way that mattered. We stepped outside together for a while after dinner. The vineyard had string lights across the back terrace, and it was just cool enough that you wanted a jacket. She seems great, Owen said. June and the family. They are. He was quiet for a moment, holding his wine glass. I've been doing some thinking. Good, I said. I think I let a lot of things. He stopped, started again. I don't think I was a good son, Dad. For a while. I didn't rush to reassure him, which I think I would have done in an earlier version of myself. I let it sit. I know, I said. I'm sorry. I know that too. We stood there for a bit. The music from inside drifted out through the open door, something slow and old, the kind of song people's parents dance to. Across the terrace, I could see June laughing at something Noelle had said, her hand at her daughter's elbow, the easy physical shorthand of people who have loved each other a long time. Those dinners in the spring, Owen said. Can we actually do them? Real ones, not parking lot lunches. Yes, I said. Call me, not a text. Call me. He nodded. We went back inside. Here's the thing about getting older that no one warns you about clearly enough. You spend most of your life building towards something. The career, the house, the family, the shape of the life you thought you were making. And then there's a period. Sometimes it sneaks up on you, and sometimes it arrives all at once, where you have to decide who you are when some of that structure turns out to be different than you expected. I spent 2 years grieving a version of things that wasn't coming back. And somewhere in the middle of that, in a diner on Christmas morning, I sat down across from a stranger who needed a quiet booth, and without any intention or planning, I started building something new. June once said to me, we were on her back porch, this was maybe a year into knowing each other, watching the light change over a neighbor's garden. She said, I think the second life is the real one. The first one you're just learning what you actually want. I've thought about that a lot. My son and I had dinner in January at a steakhouse in Raleigh that he picked because he remembered it was the kind of place I liked. He made the reservation. He drove. Renata didn't come, and that was fine. That's a longer and slower road, and I'm not in a hurry about it. We sat across from each other for 2 hours and talked about real things. His work, my knee, a documentary we'd both watched about the fishing industry of all things. He asked about June. I told him honestly some of what she meant to me. He listened. When we said goodbye in the parking lot, he hugged me the way he used to when he was a kid. Not the sideways, one-arm kind, but a real one. Same time next month, he said. Call me, I said. He called. Family, I said. He called. Family, I've come to think, isn't something that just happens to you. It's a thing you make choices toward, over and over, even when it's inconvenient or uncertain or goes differently than you planned. The people who sat at my birthday table and raised their glasses, the woman who asked a stranger if she could share a booth, the daughter who baked a cake, the son who eventually called. All of it counts. All of it is real. You just have to be willing to show up and find out. I've thought a lot about the sequence of things, how one decision leads to the next, and how you rarely see it happening while it's happening. Owen didn't set out to push me away. I don't believe that. I think he made a series of small choices to keep the peace with Renata, to avoid difficult conversations, to take the path that cost him the least in the short term. And each one of those choices cost something else that he didn't notice was missing until much later. That's how it usually goes. The damage isn't dramatic. It accumulates quietly, the way water gets into a foundation, and by the time you see the cracks, the work has already been done. And I did the same thing for a while. I made my own small choices to wait, to hope, to not say the thing that needed saying, because I thought patience was the same as wisdom. It isn't, always. Sometimes patience is just fear dressed up in a more acceptable coat. What changed for me wasn't a single moment. It was sitting across from June in that booth at Greta's on Christmas morning and realizing that a stranger was asking me better questions than I'd been asking myself. She didn't have any stake in my answers. She didn't need me to be fine, so she didn't assume I was. There's something clarifying about that kind of attention. It asked something of me that I'd stopped asking of myself, which was to be honest about what I actually wanted and what I was actually willing to do about it. The honest answer was that I'd been waiting to be chosen. By Owen, by Renata, by the version of my life I thought I was going to have. And waiting to be chosen is its own kind of trap because it makes your sense of worth entirely dependent on someone else's decision. I think that's the thing I most needed to learn, and I think I needed to be 63 years old and eating pancakes alone on Christmas morning to finally understand it. What I've come to believe, not from any book or philosophy, just from living long enough, is that character isn't what you do when things are easy. It's what you do when the person you love most is making it very hard to love them. Whether you hold your ground with kindness, whether you tell the truth without cruelty, whether you say no to a $14,000 loan and yes to a financial advisor and mean both of those things as acts of love rather than punishment. Owen came back. Not because I chased him or shamed him or waited with the door open making it easy. He came back because I built something real while he was gone, and when he finally saw it, he understood what he'd been missing. That's not a strategy. I didn't plan it that way, but I think there's something true in it. That the best thing you can sometimes do for the people who have pulled away from you is to demonstrate, quietly, that your life continues and has value and is full of people who chose to show up. June said to me once that the second life is the real one. I think she's right. Not because the first one doesn't matter, but because the second one is built on what you've actually learned, rather than what you assumed. You make it with clearer eyes. You make it knowing what you were wrong about and what you won't compromise on. You make it, most importantly, on purpose. I don't know where things go from here with Owen. I know we had dinner in January and he hugged me like he meant it. I know he called the following month like I asked. I know Noelle's wedding photo is on my refrigerator and that June and I are going to a concert in the spring and that Philip from next door is teaching me to play chess badly. That's enough. That's more than enough. Show up. Tell the truth. Build something. Let people find their way back on their own time. That's all I know. That's all I've got.